I never imagined that my life would take such a dramatic turn. I was married to Emily for 10 years, and while our marriage had its ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. We didn't have kids, which allowed us to focus entirely on each other, our careers, and our shared dreams. Emily was a successful interior designer, and I ran a small but profitable IT consulting business. We lived comfortably in our suburban home, surrounded by friends and family who admired our seemingly perfect relationship. Lately, however, things had started to feel off. Emily's job often required her to work late or visit clients, but recently her absences had become more frequent and less predictable. She started taking long, unexplained trips and often returned home late with flimsy excuses. I noticed a change in her demeanor, too. She was more distant, distracted, and irritable. Our conversations became shallow, and our once vibrant intimacy dwindled to almost nothing. I tried to rationalize these changes, attributing them to the stress of her demanding job. But deep down, a nagging feeling kept telling me something was wrong. The first significant red flag came when she began receiving an unusual number of calls and texts, often stepping out of the room to take them. She'd become protective of her phone, a stark contrast to the openness we once shared. One evening, while we were having dinner, Emily received a call. She glanced at the screen, excused herself, and walked out to the backyard to answer it. I watched her from the window, her animated gestures and hushed tones fueling my suspicions. When she returned, she brushed it off as a work call. But I knew better. The final straw came when I stumbled upon a receipt from a car repair shop in her purse. It was strange because Emily had always relied on our trusted family mechanic for any car issues. The name on the receipt, Jake's Auto Repair, was unfamiliar to me. When I asked her about it, she gave a vague explanation about needing a quick fix while she was out of town. Her evasiveness only made my doubts grow stronger. I decided it was time to investigate further. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, and I needed to know the truth. Little did I know that my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The days following my discovery of the receipt were some of the most agonizing of my life. My mind was a whirlpool of doubts and fears. Emily's increasingly secretive behavior only fueled my suspicions. Every time she left the house, my imagination conjured up worst-case scenarios. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. The uncertainty was eating me alive. One Friday evening, Emily told me she had to work late on a last-minute project for a high-profile client. As she dressed up more than usual for a work night, my suspicions flared. She chose an outfit I knew she wouldn't wear for a typical client meeting. My heart pounded as I watched her leave, a determined look on her face. I decided to follow her. It was a desperate move, but I needed to know the truth. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys and quietly followed her in my car. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed her through the familiar streets of our suburb and out towards the city. She drove to an area I wasn't familiar with, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a small, dimly lit restaurant. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of the car, checking her reflection in the window before heading inside. My heart sank as I saw a man approach her, a tall, rugged-looking guy in a mechanic's uniform. They exchanged a few words before he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek, it was a passionate kiss, the kind we hadn't shared in a long time. My world shattered in that instant. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and betrayal wash over me. My worst fears had been confirmed. Emily was cheating on me, and the man she was with was the mechanic from Jake's Auto Repair. The scene before me was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. I had to force myself to stay calm and collected, not wanting to cause a scene in public. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, needing tangible proof of her infidelity. My hands trembled as I captured the evidence, each click of the camera shutter echoing in my mind like a hammer. I felt nauseous, a knot tightening in my stomach as I watched them enter the restaurant together, laughing and holding hands. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, trying to process what I had just witnessed. The woman I loved, the one I had shared a decade of my life with, was in the arms of another man. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was I to blame for this? What would I do next? Finally, I decided to confront Emily, but not there and then. I needed to do it on my terms, in a controlled environment where I could gather my thoughts and present the evidence. I drove home in a daze. The image of them kissing burned into my memory. That night, I barely slept, my mind replaying the betrayal over and over. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. It was time to face Emily and demand answers. I knew it would be one of the hardest things I'd ever have to do, but I deserved the truth. Our marriage deserved at least that much. The confrontation was inevitable, and I was ready to hear whatever she had to say, no matter how painful it might be. The following day felt like I was living in slow motion. Every second stretched into an eternity as I waited for Emily to return from her work meeting. She finally came home late in the afternoon, looking cheerful and carrying a small bag that likely contained some souvenir from her date with the mechanic. Seeing her so carefree while I was in turmoil stoked the flames of my anger and determination. "Hey," she greeted me with a smile as she set her bag on the kitchen counter. "How was your day?" I struggled to maintain my composure, my voice strained. "We need to talk, Emily." She looked up, sensing the tension in my tone. "Sure, what's up?" "Can we sit down?" I gestured toward the living room, and she followed me, a hint of concern clouding her features. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, an invisible chasm between us. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who is Jake?" Her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly masked it with a look of confusion. "Jake? What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb, Emily. I know about him. I followed you last night." The color drained from her face, and she opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. I took the opportunity to pull out my phone and show her the photos I had taken. The evidence was undeniable. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the images, her hands trembling. I can explain," she stammered. "Explain?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with some mechanic? Explain how you've been lying to me for God knows how long." Her tears started to fall, and she buried her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen!" I shot back, my anger boiling over. "You made a choice, Emily. You chose to betray me, to betray our marriage. How long has this been going on?" She wiped her tears and looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "It started a few months ago. I was feeling lonely, and he was there. It was never supposed to go this far." "Lonely?" I scoffed. "So you decided the best way to handle that was to cheat on me? Did you ever think about talking to me? Working on our marriage?" She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to talk to you about it. You were always so busy with work, and I felt like you didn't notice me anymore." I felt a pang of guilt at her words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the betrayal I was grappling with. "You should have tried, Emily. We could have worked through it together. Instead, you threw everything away for some fling." She sobbed harder, unable to meet my gaze. I know I messed up. I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did," I said, my voice cold. "You hurt me more than you can imagine. I don't know how we're supposed to move forward from this." For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and oppressive. Emily finally looked up, her face a mixture of sorrow and desperation. "Can we try to fix this? I love you, and I don't want to lose you." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Love? If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Emily." She reached out, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, let's go to counseling. We can work through this. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. "I need time to think. Right now, I can't even look at you without feeling betrayed." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Take all the time you need. I'll do anything to make this right." I walked away, leaving her sobbing on the couch. As I retreated to the bedroom, I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and uncertainty. The woman I loved had betrayed me, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I needed time to figure out if our marriage could be salvaged, or if it was time to walk away from the life we had built together. The days that followed the confrontation were some of the darkest of my life. I felt like I was walking through a fog, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. Emily had shattered my trust, and the pain was unbearable. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind was a constant reel of the images of her with Jake, the mechanic, and the bitter words we had exchanged. I spent most of my time locked in the bedroom, avoiding Emily as much as possible. I knew she was hurting too, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The person who had vowed to love and cherish me had betrayed me in the most profound way. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the deceit and the lies. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. Friends and family noticed the change in me. I withdrew from social activities, avoiding gatherings and declining invitations. I couldn't bear to pretend that everything was okay when my world was falling apart. My best friend David sensed something was wrong and reached out. "Hey man, you've been pretty quiet lately. Is everything okay?" he asked over the phone one evening. For a moment I considered lying, but the need to confide in someone was overwhelming. "No, David, everything is not okay. Emily, she's been cheating on me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a sigh. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Do you want to talk about it?" The floodgates opened, and I poured out everything. The suspicions, the confrontation, the betrayal. David listened patiently, offering words of support and understanding. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you." His words provided some comfort, but they couldn't erase the pain. I decided to see a therapist, hoping professional help might guide me through the emotional turmoil. Dr. Taylor, the therapist I chose, was a calm, empathetic woman in her 50s with years of experience. "Infidelity is one of the hardest things to overcome in a relationship," she said during our first session. "It's completely normal to feel a range of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. The important thing is to allow yourself to feel these emotions and not bottle them up." She helped me understand that it was okay to grieve the loss of the trust I once had in Emily. She also encouraged me to think about what I wanted moving forward. "You have to decide whether you want to try to rebuild this relationship or if it's time to move on," she said gently. The idea of moving on felt impossible at first. I couldn't imagine my life without Emily, despite the betrayal. But as the days turned into weeks, the fog began to lift slightly. I started to see glimpses of a future where I could find happiness again, even if it wasn't with her. Emily, for her part, was relentless in her attempts to make amends. She wrote me long letters, apologizing for her actions and expressing her love for me. She suggested we go to couples counseling, promising to do whatever it took to rebuild my trust. But every time I read her words or listened to her pleas, a voice in my head kept asking, "Can you ever really trust her again?" The doubt gnawed at me, making it hard to see a path to reconciliation. The memories of her betrayal were like a wound that wouldn't heal. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, I found myself at the local park, sitting on a bench and staring at the sunset. The vibrant colors in the sky seemed to mock the darkness in my heart. I pulled out my phone and dialed David's number. "I don't know what to do, man," I said when he answered. "I don't know if I can ever trust her again." David was silent for a moment. Then he spoke softly. "Trust is hard to rebuild, especially after something like this. But you need to figure out what you want. Do you want to give her another chance? Or do you think it's time to move on?" His words echoed Dr. Taylor's advice, and I realized that I needed to make a decision. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. The pain of the betrayal was real, but so was the history and the love we once shared. I needed to confront my feelings head on and decide what was best for me. That night, I sat down with Emily for the first time since our confrontation. We talked for hours, laying everything bare. She admitted to her loneliness and how she had felt neglected. I admitted to being so focused on work that I had overlooked her needs. It was a painful, raw conversation, but it was necessary. "I want to try to fix this," she said through her tears. "I know I messed up, but I love you, and I want to make this work." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give us another chance. But another part of me was scared of getting hurt again. I needed more time to think, to figure out if I could truly forgive her and move forward. "Let's take it one step at a time," I said finally. "We'll go to counseling, and we'll see if we can rebuild what we lost. But I need you to understand that it won't be easy, and it will take a lot of time and effort." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "I understand. Thank you for giving us a chance." As we sat there, holding hands for the first time in weeks, I realized that the road to healing would be long and difficult. But at least we were taking the first step together. Whether we would ultimately succeed or not, only time would tell. But for now, it was a start. Even though I agreed to give our relationship a chance, the rage and betrayal I felt were still raw and potent. Emily's affair with Jake was a constant tormenting presence in my mind. I had so many unresolved emotions, and every time I saw her, I was reminded of her infidelity. I tried to focus on counseling and rebuilding, but there was an anger in me that I couldn't shake off. One day, after yet another sleepless night, I decided that I needed to confront Jake, the man who had inserted himself into my life and shattered my marriage. I knew where his auto repair shop was, and I felt a primal urge to face him, to make him understand the pain he had caused me. It wasn't a rational decision, but I felt like I needed closure, and this seemed like the only way to get it. I waited until Emily left for work before I set out. The drive to Jake's shop felt like an eternity. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying every painful moment since I discovered the affair. When I arrived, I saw Jake working on a car in the shop's garage. I parked my car and walked towards him, my fists clenched. "Hey, Jake!" I called out, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Oh, hey! You must be Emily's husband." "Yeah," I said, my voice hardening. "We need to talk." Before he could respond, I closed the distance between us and threw the first punch. It landed squarely on his jaw, and he stumbled backward, crashing into a tool chest. The look of shock and pain on his face was immensely satisfying, and it fueled my anger further. "You think you can just sleep with my wife and get away with it?" I yelled, grabbing him by the collar and landing another punch to his face. He tried to defend himself, but I was relentless, my fist driven by months of pent-up rage. He managed to shove me off him, staggering to his feet. "Wait, man, let's talk about this." "Talk? You want to talk?" I spat, advancing on him again. "You destroyed my marriage. You don't get to talk." I threw another punch, this time hitting him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping for breath. I didn't stop. I kicked him, sending him sprawling onto the concrete floor. He looked up at me, blood streaming from his nose and lip, his eyes wide with fear. "Please stop!" he begged, raising his hands in a feeble attempt to protect himself. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my knuckles throbbing from the impact. The sight of him, broken and bleeding, should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It only made me realize how far I had fallen, how consumed by anger I had become. I took a step back, trying to catch my breath. "Stay away from Emily. If I ever see you near her again, I won't hold back next time." He nodded, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "I swear I'll stay away from her, just, please, stop." I turned and walked out of the garage, my head spinning. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the violent encounter over and over. When I got home, I washed the blood off my hands, the realization of what I had done slowly sinking in. But my revenge didn't stop there. I wanted to ruin Jake's life the way he had ruined mine. I knew the power of information and how it could destroy a person's career. I spent the next few days gathering every bit of information I could about Jake's shop, his business practices, and his personal life. I talked to his customers, probing for any complaints or unsatisfied clients. I found several who were unhappy with his work, claiming he had overcharged them or botched repairs. Armed with this information, I anonymously reported Jake to the Better Business Bureau and left scathing reviews online, detailing the complaints I had gathered. I even went as far as to create a social media campaign, warning people about his shady practices and urging them to take their business elsewhere. Within weeks, Jake's once thriving auto repair shop was hemorrhaging customers, and his reputation was in tatters. The final blow came when I reported him to the local authorities for tax evasion, having found evidence of under-the-table transactions and unreported income. The investigation that followed led to hefty fines and legal troubles that would take years for him to untangle. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to feel any satisfaction. The revenge I had sought was hollow. I had ruined Jake's career, but it hadn't erased the betrayal or healed the wounds left by Emily's infidelity. Instead, it left me feeling emptier, the anger replaced by a cold numbness. Emily noticed the change in me. "What's going on with you?" she asked one evening as we sat in tense silence. I looked at her, wondering if she could ever understand the depths of my pain. "I dealt with Jake," I said simply. She looked shocked, her eyes wide with concern. "What did you do?" "I made sure he'll never come near you again," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't make the pain go away. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm so sorry for everything. Sorry isn't enough, Emily, I said, standing up. We have a long way to go, and I don't know if we'll ever get there. As I walked away, I realized that revenge had not given me the closure I had hoped for. It had only deepened my sense of loss and confusion. I needed to find a way to heal, not just for myself, but for the sake of whatever future I had left. The days following my confrontation with Jake and the subsequent fallout were some of the most challenging of my life. Despite Emily's attempts to make amends and our efforts in couples counseling, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was irrevocably damaged. The trust that once formed the foundation of our marriage was shattered, and no amount of therapy or apologies seemed to be able to mend it. Our counseling sessions were filled with tense discussions and emotional outbursts. Emily was remorseful and committed to making things right, but I found myself growing increasingly detached. Each session seemed to highlight the depth of our issues, rather than offering a path to resolution. The counselor suggested we take some time apart to gain clarity, but I already knew what I needed to do. One evening, after another fruitless counseling session, I sat Emily down in the living room. The weight of the decision I was about to make pressed heavily on my chest. Emily, I began, my voice steady but filled with sorrow. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened. I don't think we can fix this. Her eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. No, we can. We just need more time. We can get through this. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wish I could believe that, but the trust is gone. Every time I look at you, I see the betrayal. It's not fair to either of us to keep dragging this out. She reached out, taking my hands in hers. Please, let's keep trying. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I gently pulled my hands away, the physical distance mirroring the emotional chasm between us. I love you too, Emily, but love isn't enough. Not anymore. I think it's time we consider divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Emily's tears flowed freely, and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I felt a pang of guilt and sorrow, but also a sense of relief. It was the first time I had spoken the word out loud, and it felt like a necessary step toward healing. I'll move out, I said quietly. I'll find a place and give you some space. We can figure out the details later. But I think this is what's best for both of us. Emily didn't respond, her body racked with sobs. I stood up and walked to the bedroom, packing a suitcase with some essentials. As I moved around the house, I felt the weight of our shared memories pressing down on me. This was the place where we had built our life together. But now, it felt like a cage. The next morning, I called a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. I explained the situation, and he assured me that he would handle everything discreetly and efficiently. I wanted to avoid a long, drawn-out legal battle, hoping we could settle things amicably. I found a small apartment on the other side of town and moved in within a week. It was a modest place, but it offered me the solitude I needed to process everything. Emily and I agreed to communicate through our lawyers as much as possible, minimizing direct contact to avoid further emotional pain. The divorce process was a blur of paperwork and meetings. Our lawyer mediated the division of assets, and since we didn't have children, it was relatively straightforward. Emily kept the house, and I took my share of the savings and moved on with my life. Despite the amicable nature of the proceedings, there were still moments of deep sadness and regret. I often found myself staring at old photos, reminiscing about the good times we shared. But I knew that those memories were part of the past, and clinging to them would only hinder my healing. One day, about a month after I moved out, I received a call from David. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm managing," I replied. "It's tough, but I think this was the right decision." "Good to hear," he said. "Remember, you're not alone. If you need anything, just let me know." His support, along with that of a few close friends, helped me navigate the tumultuous waters of divorce. They reminded me that I still had people who cared about me, who would stand by me no matter what. As the final papers were signed and the divorce was officially concluded, I felt a mixture of relief and grief. The chapter with Emily was over, and it was time to start writing a new one. I began focusing on rebuilding my life, finding solace in my work and new routines. I took up new hobbies, rediscovered old passions, and gradually started to feel more like myself again. The wounds of betrayal and heartbreak slowly began to heal, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. One evening, as I sat in my apartment sipping a cup of tea and reflecting on the past few months, I realized that I had grown stronger through this ordeal. The pain had shaped me, but it hadn't broken me. I was ready to move forward, to embrace whatever the future held with an open heart and a resilient spirit. The journey was far from over, but I had taken the first steps toward a new beginning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that everything would be all right. The months following the finalization of the divorce were a period of significant personal growth and reflection. I found myself reevaluating not just my relationship with Emily, but also my understanding of who I was and what I wanted from life. The emotional roller coaster I had been on forced me to confront my deepest insecurities and fears, but it also helped me emerge stronger and more self-aware. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the structure and predictability it provided. My IT consulting business became a refuge, a place where I could regain a sense of control and competence. The support from my colleagues and clients was invaluable, reminding me that I had a purpose and a community outside of my failed marriage. In my free time, I began exploring new hobbies and interests. I took up running, finding that the physical exertion helped clear my mind and release pent-up emotions. I joined a local running group, which not only improved my fitness, but also introduced me to new friends who shared my interests. The camaraderie and sense of achievement I found in running were therapeutic, helping me rebuild my confidence and sense of self-worth. I also rekindled my love for photography, a hobby I had neglected during my marriage. I spent weekends exploring the city and its surroundings, capturing moments of beauty and tranquility through my lens. Photography became a form of meditation, allowing me to see the world with fresh eyes and appreciate the simple joys of life. One evening, while editing some photos at a local cafe, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Claire. She was an artist, working on a series of paintings inspired by the urban landscape. We bonded over our shared love of creativity and began meeting regularly to discuss our projects and share ideas. Our friendship grew naturally, providing me with a sense of connection and companionship that I had been missing. Through these new experiences and relationships, I started to heal. The anger and bitterness I had felt toward Emily and Jake gradually faded, replaced by a sense of acceptance and peace. I realized that holding on to those negative emotions was only hurting me and preventing me from moving forward. Forgiveness, both of myself and others, became an essential part of my healing process. Emily and I maintained minimal contact, communicating only when necessary to finalize the remaining details of our divorce. The distance allowed us both to heal and move on, and I hoped that she too would find peace and happiness in her own way. As time passed, I began to feel a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The pain of betrayal had left its mark, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of honest communication in relationships. I knew that I was stronger and wiser because of what I had endured, and I was determined to use those lessons to build a better future. One day, as I was running along a scenic trail with my running group, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape, and I realized that I was genuinely happy. The journey had been long and difficult, but I had emerged on the other side with a deeper understanding of myself and a renewed appreciation for life. Claire and I continued to grow closer, and our friendship eventually blossomed into something more. We took things slowly, both of us cautious after past experiences, but our connection was genuine and built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared interests. With Claire, I found a partner who understood me and supported my growth, and I was determined to do the same for her. Reflecting on the past year, I saw how far I had come from that initial moment of betrayal. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had also been transformative. I had learned to face my emotions, to seek help when needed, and to prioritize my own well-being. Life is unpredictable, and while I couldn't change the past, I had the power to shape my future. I had learned to let go of anger and resentment, to forgive, and to move forward with an open heart. The experiences I had endured had made me stronger, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. As I stood at the top of a hill, overlooking the city with Claire by my side, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a new and hopeful chapter in my life. I had found peace within myself, and I was ready to build a future filled with love, trust, and happiness.